We are on week number 4 of the Esther series, and I think we got one more week left. Might be 2. We definitely have one more left. Might be 2. And this is one of those stories in the Bible that, man, I almost hesitate to tell it. And the reason why is because this is one of the times in the Bible where everything works out exactly perfectly. And my experience is life isn't like that, right? And so I hate to give us a false hope here, but I just got to tell you, the way this works out today is almost hilarious. It is, in a way. It's dark humor, I guess, but I find it very funny because the bad guy in the story, of course, is Haman, and he gets everything he deserves exactly the way he deserves it in this story. Spoiler alert in case you've never read Esther. But we're going to look at the weight of disobedience here today. And I'm going to start picking up where we left off, but I kind of held some things back last week. We talked about what's happened, a reset for those of you who've slept and can't remember what we're talking about. So we're in the book of Esther, and in the book of Esther, Esther becomes the queen, not because she wants to be the queen. She doesn't want to be the queen. She just happens to be very beautiful, and the king picks her. So she's the queen. She's Jewish, but she doesn't tell anybody she's Jewish. And her parents have died. Her uncle is raising her as his own daughter, so her adopted father's named Mordecai. And Mordecai is very faithful to God, but also very faithful as a servant of the Persian Empire. Now, the king at this time is a guy named Xerxes. He's the same guy you've seen in the movie 300. The guy goes and tries to conquer Greece unsuccessfully. But he's planning to do that now. So you'll notice in the book of Esther, he seems distracted. That's why. He's actually planning for an invasion. About 2 or 3 years after this, he invades Greece. So he's in the midst of his planning for an invasion. And because he needs money, he actually starts exalting certain nobles who are rich, and one of them is Haman. So he actually needs Haman's money, who's apparently real rich, so he exalts him to the highest level. He's the highest level administrator in his kingdom. He says everybody needs to pay homage to him. He wants to give him a little props there, because you'll find out Haman likes that kind of thing. You know, he knows he's a king. He knows how to get to people. He knows Haman likes this. So everybody's supposed to, everybody treat him like he's something special. But Mordecai won't, because they've actually taken a seal of Haman's family, and they put it on the gate that leads into the palace. And everybody's supposed to bow before that seal before they go in. And Mordecai's like, yeah, I'm a Jew. I'm not doing that. I'm not bowing to that. And there was actually a false idol on the seal. You know, I'm not bowing to that. And that infuriates Haman. So he says, okay, I'm going to get my revenge. And the way he chooses to get his revenge is to kill all the Jews. So this is like over the top. So he's going to kill all the Jews. So he goes to Xerxes. He says to Xerxes, hey, there's this group of people in your kingdom called the Jews, and they're not like us. They don't follow our ways. We need to get rid of them. I'll tell you what, I know that's going to cost a lot of money, killing all these people. I will pay in the treasury from my own silver mines. I'll pay in the treasury enough money to kill all the Jews. If you would kill all the Jews, I'll pay for it. And Xerxes, who's way too busy for this, says, you know what? He takes the signet ring off and hands it to him and says, go ahead, take that money you're going to spend, and you go ahead and kill the Jews. Fine, go ahead and do that. I'm busy. And so Mordecai goes and holds his council, and they decide the exact month they're going to kill the Jews, because they plan it, and they start setting the plans to kill the Jews. Well, Mordecai finds out, and he gets obviously upset, because he and all of his people are going to be killed, genocide. And so he goes to Esther, who's now the queen and happens to be Jewish, and says, you need to speak to the king. And we know that that's a big thing, because she's not allowed to speak to the king unless he calls her, and that happened last week. Now, when she goes to speak to the king says, well, what do you want? Like, when she shows up, she says, you know, my loving, beautiful wife, what do you want? Anything you want, I'll give you. Just ask. And she says, here's what I want. I want you to come to dinner with me. I'm going to prepare a banquet in your honor, and will you bring your number one trusted assistant, Haman, with you? That's all she asks for. Just come. And so they do, and they have this wonderful dinner. And in it, he says to her, okay, I'm here. I know you want something. What do you want? Anything you want, I'll do. And she goes, here's what I want. Come to my next dinner. I want to have another banquet for you and Haman. And it's like, this is, we talked about that last week. That's last week's sermon. We talked about why 2 banquets, what happens. But I left out a part between the 2 banquets. I didn't show you that. And we're going to go pick that up today. So we're kind of going a little bit back in the story, a day or so. So what happens is, after the first banquet, Haman walks out, and he is beaming, just walking on cloud 9, singing zippity doo-dah or whatever you're allowed to sing these days. I guess you can't sing that anymore. But he's just like having a good time, because everything's good. he is the exalted administrator, right? The trusted advisor, because the queen actually threw a banquet in honor of the king and him. That shows that he's number 2 in the kingdom right now, at least in the queen's eyes. He's special. He's walking out with joy in his heart, and he sees Mordecai, and all the joy goes away. Have you known people like that? It's like they can't be happy for more than a day. They can't be happy for a minute. They'll see one thing and it just takes it all away. That's how Haman is. And that shows you you're not a very happy person, by the way. That means you're not naturally happy. And we're supposed to be naturally happy as Christians. You know that, right? I mean, it's supposed to be that we're supposed to be joyful. People are supposed to look at us and say, man, I wish I had what they had. And I'm just worried because I know some Christians that are just not naturally happy. Years ago, I wanted to be a pilot for a while. And we met this guy that my older brother worked with, and he turns out he was a flight instructor. He says, I'll take you up. You want to go up? I'll get a Cessna. We'll go up. And she says, Mike, you want to go with us? And Mike's afraid of heights. Mike did not want to go out with us, but he talked him into it. So we all get in the plane, and we're going out, and we're up in the air, and he's asking me about it, and I've been reading up on it, I read Stick and Rudder and all this stuff. He said, that's pretty cool. He says, you want to take the yoke for a second? You're flying in a 2-seater side by side, and you both have this yoke. And my brother in the back is like shouting through his little headphones, no, he doesn't know anything he's doing. Mike, stop. And he said, it's okay, I'm a flight instructor. I don't care, he's an idiot. Don't let him touch those things, And so he says, it's really okay. He says, Mike, look, watch. And he takes his hands off the yoke. So now nobody's flying the plane, He's like, what are you doing? Get your hands back on. He's like screaming. He's like back seat. Like, I'll go, he's like trying to push him to get back. He says, Mike, I just want you to watch. I want you to see. I'm seeing. Put your hands back on the wheel. And so he puts his hands back on the yoke. He said, do you know why that plane was flying? Because it's made to fly, not to crash. A plane is made to fly, not to crash. And if everything's trimmed right, everything's set right, the plane's going to fly. That's what it's designed to do. If the plane's not going to fly, it isn't designed right. And I always thought that's how Christians are supposed to be, right? We're designed to fly. We're designed to be happy. We're designed to have joy. And if we're not, well, there's something wrong with us. If it takes one thing to steal our joy, we're like Haman. We're not like Jesus. That's little. That's no charge for that sermon. They didn't even get that one last night. Okay, so he sees him. He gets all mad, but he restrains himself. He says, "You know what? It's okay. I'm not going to let Mordecai ruin my day. I've had a great day." So he goes. He gathers his friends. He gathers his wife, a woman named Zeresh, and he says, I know what'll make me feel better. Let's have a dinner, and we'll talk about how great I am. That's always a fun topic for me. So he's going to boast about his wealth. He has all these sons, and all the way the kings had honored him, and how he has been elevated among all the other officials. And then as he's telling all these great stories, he says, you know what? I'm the only person that Esther invited to eat with the king. That's great. And everybody says, that's fantastic. He says, yes, but you know what? It's not enough. Because that Mordecai, and he starts getting upset again. That Mordecai sitting there at the king's gate, sitting, not kneeling, sitting. I hate that guy. But all of his friends are there to help him, right? And his wife. So they said, well, listen, here's what you ought to do. You know you're going to kill him soon, right? Just a couple months. You know that. The king doesn't know that. No one else. But instead of killing him the way everybody else gets killed, by the sword, why don't you just impale him right in front of your house? Yeah, because that's a nice house decoration, really, right outside the pool, right between the two trees. So we're gonna have him put this big pole set up with a spike on it, 50 cubits high. That's like 150 feet in the air. That's huge. And we're going to impale him on it because that's going to just make it look so great right out front. And then you'll be able to look out every day and you'll see what happens to somebody who disobeys you. And he thinks that's a good idea. In fact, the Bible says it delighted him. It's like, yes, that makes me feel good thinking about Mordecai's corpse in front of my house. So he does. And so then we had this moment we talked about last week. It was so important where the king couldn't sleep that night. So this is what Mordecai's doing. He's planning on killing Mordecai. Haman's doing. He's planning on killing Mordecai. But the king couldn't sleep that night. And so he gets up after tossing and turning and says, yeah, just read me the court minutes. I'm going to catch up on some stuff, and reading the court minutes always puts me to sleep anyway. Just read me the court minutes. And as they're reading it, there comes this part where Mordecai had discovered a plot to assassinate the king, and he came and told the king and saved his life. And Xerxes kind of sits up at that moment, and you can see this is God, right? God's hand's been through all this. And King sits up and says, yeah, what did we do for that guy? What did we do for him? And his attendant says, nothing. And the king said, that's not right. We should do something. And then he says, who's in the court right now? Because I need an advisor, right? It's late at night. Well, it just so happens that Haman's come into the court because he wants to tell him about this plan he has for this mass execution. And so he says, who's in the outer court? Because he had just come to talk about impaling Mordecai. And the attendant says, well, Haman's out there. Your top advisor's here right now. Well, send him in, he says. Let's talk about this. So I want you to picture this. So Haman comes in. He thinks he's like number 2 in the kingdom right now. He's the man. Even Esther loves him, right? So he walks in, yes, king. Yes, you saw him right away. Didn't make him wait at all. Yes, yes. And then the king says this. Hypothetically speaking, what do you think we should do for a man who just the king would love to honor? The king would delight in honoring this guy, just hypothetically. Now, what's Haman think? He's sitting there thinking, oh, he's talking about me now, right? Because this is the way people like Haman always think. It's always them. You know, everybody loves me. Oh, huh. He's asking me how I want to be honored. Oh, how like Xerxes. This is great. We're buddies now, right? This is like me going to my wife and saying, in case you were thinking about buying me a Christmas present this year, you know, it's like, what kind of a Christmas present would you? It's just like it'd be great. So this is it's terrific. So he thinks about it. I don't even know if he has to think about it. He comes up with his answer pretty quick here. I know exactly what I want. He said, "I'll tell you what you do to this guy, this hypothetical man, who whatever his name is, Your Highness. For that man, the king delights in. Have them bring a royal robe that the king has worn before, because that makes it more special, and a horse the king has ridden before." And with a royal crest, yes, placed on his head, and let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most trusted princes. You know, one other guy, one of the lesser guys in the courtroom. Let them robe this man and lead him on a horse to the streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man that the king delights to honor. Right? He can see it. He's going to pull him right by that Mordecai, and I'm going to look down at him. It's going to be glorious. My wife's going to see me. She goes, oh, husband, you look so great up there on the king's horse, you know? He's like picturing it in his mind. This is really great. And no sooner the words out of his mouth, and the king says, that's right. At once, right now. And he's like, yes? Get that robe and the horse, just like you said. Do as you suggest. For Mordecai the Jew. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how the king feels at this one? The Jew. The guy came to tell I was going to kill. What? So Haman gets the robe and the horse and robe Mordecai, and Mordecai has no idea what's going on, right? None at all. He's like, I'm doing what now? He knows that Haman hates him. You're going to do what now? You're going to put a robe on me, put him on a horse, and take me through the city. Okay. You know, so he does. And he has to lead him through and proclaim that, right? And you know he's like saying, this is what is done for the man the king has delighted to honor. Yeah. And Zeresh watches him walk by going, you know, I just love this scene because he's totally humiliated by the exact thing that he was trying to humiliate. And then he goes home and he realizes, I'm in big trouble. That little thing that just happened here, that's not a small thing. He goes rushing home and he tells Zeresh's wife and all of his friends, you're not going to believe what just happened. And he tells them a story. And Zeresh says, whoa. Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you know he's Jewish. You can't stand against him now. You're going to try to kill the man that you just rode through the streets saying that the king wants to honor? Oh, this isn't good. In fact, she says, you're going to be ruined. There's no way this doesn't end in tears. You're going to be ruined. This whole thing is just about to blow up on you. And while he's sitting there thinking what he's going to do, they show up and say, hey, Haman, time to come to the second banquet with Esther and the king. And now he's not walking his glorious thing. He's like marching to the gallows with that song playing in the background of his head. Dum, 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 dum. Doom is coming. He knows it. And there's nothing he can do to stop it. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, and they were drinking wine, because that's when you always talk to the king, especially this one apparently, is always when he's drinking wine. On the second day, this must have been some banquet, and the king asked Queen Esther, what is your petition? I'll give it to you. Up to half my kingdom, I'll give it to you. What do you want? Anything. And the Queen Esther answers, if you found favor with me, your majesty, if it pleases you. I want you how gentle she goes into this. Here's all I ask. This is the only thing. Spare my life. Can you imagine what the king thinks? Excuse me? Spare your life. What are you talking about? You're the queen that I picked out of 1,000 others. You're my wife. I love you. Wait, what do you mean spare your life? And she says, and if you could, please also spare my people. This is my only request. And then she says this, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. Now, if they'd merely sold us as slaves, I wouldn't even bother you. For something as small as being sold into slavery, I wouldn't even trouble you, king. But they're going to kill us. They're going to kill us all. So I'm begging you, if you could save me and my people. And Xerxes asked Esther, who? Who's going to do this thing? Where is this man who would dare to lift a finger against my queen? Who is he? And she has that guy right there, that guy trying to hide under the table right now. Haman, he's my adversary and enemy, the vile Haman. That's who it is. And the king is furious. And of course, Haman is terrified. Xerxes gets up in a rage. Now, the Bible doesn't say this, but I picture him picking up his embroidered silk cloth, throwing it down, look at Haman, and storms out into the palace under the parapet there to cool off before he strangles him with his own two hands. Now, this is really something. Now Haman knows there's no talking to him now. But maybe I can reason with the queen, right? So he stays behind, so he begs Queen Esther for his life. And when the king comes back, he finds him falling on the couch next to her. This is not a good look. That's the king's queen. What are you doing on the couch with her? Are you kidding me? And you can imagine what's going to happen here now. Now, you might wonder, why did the king get up and walk out like that? Why are they angry? I believe it's because he's trying to think through what he needs to do next. Because a king, especially in Persia, can't do whatever he wants. We've seen that. There's certain things he takes in consideration. He's a good ruler in that regard, where he thinks. He doesn't just lash out and strangle him. But I think there's something else. There's something that we missed. There's a detail that we missed in the story that I think kind of occurs to Xerxes while he's out there. And this is the detail. He did not order the execution of the Jews. If we go back to Esther 3, back when Haman came to him and said, kill the Jews, he said, I'm not going to do it. He takes his signet ring off and says, you can take your money and you do it. That's a really important detail. The important detail is the king did not make the order. Haman made the order, because the king cannot rescind his order. In Persia and even in Babylon, once a king makes an edict, it cannot be rescinded. We see this happen when Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den. Darius, the king at the time, gets tricked to send Daniel into the lion's den. He doesn't want to do it. When he finds out what happened, he's mortified. And he goes to Daniel and says, I need to get you out of this. He spends all night looking through the laws, trying to find a way out of it. But the fact is, he had put his signet on the edict, and that had to be, he could not rescind it. And we see this even in this story here. We saw it earlier. We probably missed it, but back in Esther 7, they tell the king this: if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed. If Xerxes had ordered the destruction of the Jews, they would be destroyed. But God makes sure that Xerxes was too busy. And so he gave it to Haman to do it, so that the Persian law would not have to be rescinded. The king can overrule an administrator's law. And I think all this was going through his head. He's trying to think now how that did. So he didn't give that order, though. And so he comes back in knowing, okay, I don't have to kill the Jews. And he walks in and he sees Haman on the couch with his wife. Oh boy, this isn't good. And he says, is he going to molest my queen in my own house? This man, there's no end to him. And as soon as that word left his mouth, they covered Haman's face. You know where they put that thing over the head right before they execute you? That's what happens. And I love this Harbona, who's the eunuch, who knows all of this. But he can't say anything because he's a eunuch. But now he's happy. He knows everything that's going on. He knows who Haman is. He knows all this. And so he's just waiting now. He's got it all loaded, ready to go. And he says, hey, king, you may not know this, but there happens to be a pole reaching a height of 50 cubits right by Haman's house for an execution. It was going to be Mordecai's, but looks like Mordecai won't be using it. So I'm just saying, it's right there. And the king says, yep, good idea. Impale him on it. And so they take him out, and they impale him on the pole. They set it for Mordecai right in front of his house. And then the king's fury subsided. This is a story that Hollywood couldn't write. If it weren't in the Bible, I'd tell you it wasn't true. This is perfect. Haman gets what he deserves. Life isn't usually that way. Now, the Bible says that God will use plots against the evil. And we've seen that happen. We do see that happen in our lives sometimes. You know, in Psalm it says this, he makes a pit, digging it out, and falls into the hole that he made. His mischief returns upon his head. On his own skull, his own violence descends. So we're warned about this, that sometimes the violence we apply for others actually come back to us. We see that happen with Daniel. I was talking about that a minute ago. You know, Darius tried all night to find a way out. There was no way out, but that's okay because God didn't need a way out. He just simply shut up the lions. But after they take Daniel out, what happens? At the king's command, the men who falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and their children. And before they even reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Those lions were hungry. They couldn't eat all night. God wouldn't let them. But the exact thing they planned for Daniel comes to them. Same thing happens with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I can only say those things in order. I can never say them out of order. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Same thing happens to the fiery furnace. When they're pulled out of the fiery furnace, they throw in the others. We see this happen in the Bible a lot. In fact, we also see it happen in Egypt. What's the favorite Jew? He tries to kill all the children of the Jews. What's the last plague? His child is killed. So the evil that evil people plot for others, God can turn back upon themselves. It's like you judge yourself by your own actions almost. And that does happen a lot of the time. And that's why God says, stop scheming. And this is our problem. When it doesn't happen, you know, when that Haman seems to get away with it, we look at it and say, that's not fair. That's not right. I mean, right now, I know you all know some people, and they're prospering. You're saying that's not right. They shouldn't. Maybe they're a relative. Maybe they're an ex. Maybe they're a boss, somebody you work with, and you see them, and you know they're cheating, and they're conniving, they're lying, and they're little tiny punks, and they're succeeding anyway. That's hard to take, right? So sometimes we as good Christians decide it's up to us. God's busy. We'll take care of this. We'll take care of it. Well, it's okay, God. We can handle this one for you because you're taking too long. I'm going to bring my own punishment. And he warns us. He says, nope, do not scheme. In fact, he says this. He says, there are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes. Your heart's not supposed to go there. We're not supposed to be like the people in the Game of Thrones, always behind the scenes and manipulating things, manipulating this person and putting a word in the ear of that person to make things happen. He says the Lord detests that. He hates it, in fact. We're not supposed to do those things, but we feel we have to. The problem is we're doing it out of pride. And we may not realize that, but we're actually doing it out of pride because what we're saying is, I know better than God. God has not punished this person, and he means to. But since he hasn't gotten around to it, I'm going to exact my own punishment, thanks. And maybe it isn't a huge scheme. Maybe it's just somebody you can punish. One way or the other, I'm going to punish that person. I'm going to make them pay. I'm going to make them regret this. I'll make sure they never forget this moment. That happens. Pride like that blinds us to the truth. James says this. He says, get rid of all moral filth. There's an expression. I think I sometimes have too much moral filth in my lives. You want to get that cleaned up? Get rid of it, he says. Because that's just evil. And it's prevalent. It's everywhere, he says. But why? Because you need to humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Remember the parable of the sower? Sower sows the seeds. He's saying that word needs to dig into the soil in order for it to be able to create fruit. You need to be humble in order for that to happen. Humble is when you break up your heart. Really, it's not all sealed off with pride. It can receive that. If you don't do that, you won't produce the fruit. Take a look in the Bible, Galatians. It'll tell you the fruit of the Spirit. Ask yourself, is that showing up in my life? Because it's supposed to. And if it isn't, ask yourself, am I humbled? Do I really trust the Lord? Do I really? See, sometimes it's easier to trust that God will do something for us because we believe he loves us. But it's not easy to trust him to fix things that we see around us. Right? And there's things going on right now. Can you trust God to take care of it? It could be work, could be in the country, could be the world. Do we trust God to take care of that? Because it's hard. In fact, there's this great psalm, Psalm 73. This is written by one of the leaders of the synagogue. This is not David, one of the few psalms David didn't write. Anyway, he's telling a story. He says, you know what? My feet, they almost slipped. I nearly lost my foothold. You know why? I'm going to tell you. Because I envied the arrogant. When I saw the prosperity of the wicked, they have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They're free from common human burdens. They're not plagued by human ills. And they're evil. It just bothers me, he said. Therefore, pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves in violence. Their callous hearts, comes iniquity. Evil things, imaginations, they have no limits. They scoff, they speak with malice. They're arrogant, they threaten oppression. Oh, their mouths claim. They claim to heaven, but their tongues take possession of the earth. They try to tell you they're speaking for God, but they're stealing stuff on earth. And they say this, they said, how would God even know? How does the Most High know anything? I'm getting away with it. You think you're living a righteous life? Look at me. I'm not. I'm living great. I have a better life than you do. See, this is what the wicked is like. They're always carefree. They always just go on making money, amassing wealth. And in vain I've kept my heart pure, he says. Surely in vain I wash my hands in innocence. All day long I have been afflicted. Every morning brings new punishments. Don't you feel that way upside? I can't wait to wake up tomorrow to see what else is happening. What punishment's happening tomorrow to me? Just can't wait. If I had spoken out like that, I would have betrayed your children. The people you bring here that you trust me to teach. See, when I tried to understand this, it troubled me deeply until I entered the sanctuary of God. And then I understood their final destiny. It's not all about what happens here on earth. There's a final destiny coming. He said, when I realized that, I realized there's no hope for them. There's no hope for them. They may succeed and prosper for a while, but there's no hope for them. Their final destiny is coming. I don't know if you guys have ever had that experience. I was talking about this last night. When Victoria and I got engaged, we had to go through INS and fill out paperwork. And 7 months from the time I proposed and she said yes to the time she was actually set foot on U.S. soil, 7 months went by. Oh, so long. Especially since we didn't know how long it would be. It was terrible. And I was asking about it the other day. We're driving somewhere. I said, do you even remember those days now? Do you remember them at all? Because I remember they bothered me, but I don't remember them. Because we've been together for 20-some years now. Was it 22? 21? 22? Something like that. 23? The time just flies by, folks. I'm just telling you. I don't remember it. I remember that it happened. Now, there are some things that happen in my life I still feel, I'll admit. But I don't feel those 7 months. Not at all. Because 7 months compared to 23 years is nothing. Now, Picture how long 80 years counts against 10,000 times 10,000. See, God's calculus is just different than ours. Because he's saying, yeah, you're worried about this, and I'm worried about this. The final destiny. They don't stand a chance. See, pride will keep you from trusting the Lord. That's the problem. If you're having a problem trusting the Lord, you can run it right back to pride because you think you know better than God. That's pride. And if you're having problems trusting him, that's it. And if well, I trust God with this part, but not this part, look why. I don't trust him because I don't think he'll do the right thing. That's why I have to take care of this. That's why I have to punish my spouse. That's why I have to punish them. That's why I have to punish the people at work. That's why I have to make sure they pay for this. Because I don't think God will. James says, look, he says, if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition, don't pretend you know the truth. Just stop it. Because your wisdom doesn't come from above. It comes from an earthly, unspiritual, and demonic place. The wisdom from above is pure, peaceable, gentle, and open to reason, full of mercy, good fruits, and impartial and sincere. That's what you should be looking like. So don't tell me this bitter, manipulative person of yours is coming from God, because it isn't, he says. God is still on the throne. In Romans, Paul writes this, who are you? A human being to talk back to God. Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this? Does not the potter have the right to make the same lump of clay, some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? Doesn't he have the right to make you however he wants? Doesn't he have the right to do with that person whatever he wants to do? Isn't that his right as God? And that's easy to speak of hypothetically. What about if it actually happened to you, though? What about if your own family turned on you? Because, boy, they don't hurt you like your own family. Close people hurt you more than people you barely know, right? People you know well, they're the ones that hurt you. What if your own family turned on you, betrayed you in some way? That's harder, right? But then we see this guy named Joseph. His brothers threw him in a pit, sold him as a slave, and then lied about it to their dad. When they show up later, because he turns out that God exalted him and he ends up to be in charge of everything and they need his help, they're worried. Because they know what they would do if they were in Joseph's place. But Joseph doesn't do it. And then they tell themselves, that's because Dad's still alive. He doesn't want Dad to see what he has planned for us. But as soon as Dad dies, he's bringing it down on our heads. And boy, that's a scary thing, because Joseph was the most powerful man on earth. And so when the dad dies, they start trying to manipulate Joseph into not killing them. And when Joseph figures out what they're doing, he actually weeps. And he says this to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? I mean, yeah, what you guys did, you meant for harm, but God used it for good. Who am I to tell God that wasn't the only way this could happen? I don't know. All I know is God used that to save millions of people's lives. Am I going to stand up now and say God didn't do it right? No, I'm not going to do that, he says. I'm going to take care of you and your kids forever. I forgave you long ago because I see what God's doing. See, that's trusting God. That's a different level. Are you content when you see the wicked prosper? That's a good question. See, this is a real good test. This is a real good test if you want to know where your heart is. You watch somebody else prosper, you see something going on, and go, are you okay? Can you be content and say, God, take care of that? This is the thing that I talked about a couple years ago. This is like my scripture. I don't usually get one for the year, but I got this one for the year. Paul writing to his protege Timothy. He says, look, there's a constant friction between good people and people who are corrupt in mind, who have been robbed of the truth. See, they think that you're good in order to get ahead. If you're godly, God's going to reward you on earth. He says, that's corrupt. I know that's taught a lot of places here in America today, but he's saying that's corrupt. And then he says something on the way to saying something else, and Paul does this sometimes, and like those little tiny segue sentences of his, I'm like, hold up, Paul, I got to stop on that for a minute. What did you say? He says, godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Whew. That changed my life. I'm not kidding. That changed my life. I read that and I thought, I'm going to try that. The godliness is too hard. I'll try the contentment part. I'll try to at least be content. I'll try to be godly, but I'll really focus on my contentment thing. And I just did. I just thought, I'm just going to be content, I'm going to be content with what I have. And here's what I found out. When you're content, you become thankful. And when you're thankful, you become content. And this started this cycle in my life. Until I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I started to suddenly see things differently. And I started saying, yeah, you know what? I know that I live next to a bona fide mansion owned by a millionaire. That's not my house. I'm okay with that. My house is good. I don't care that I'm driving a 2005 red Jeep Liberty. It runs. There are people who don't have that. And just like everything just started layering on top of everything. I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need a mega church. I have people I know. You don't know anybody in a mega church. I've been in them. I'm okay with that. And suddenly you start realizing contentment with godliness is great gain. He goes on and says, we brought nothing in this world. We're going to take nothing out. See, God doesn't want us acting like the world because we're not like the world. And when we see people in the world who are prospering, they can do that because they're going to get their comeuppance eventually. I told a story before. Years ago, I was in Gimbel's. Kids, Gimbel's used to be a department store. A department store, never mind. Okay, but I was in Gimbel's, right? And it was on the sixth floor. They had the toy section and a book section. And my dad went to go look at books, and I was going to be able to play in the toy section, which was great. So we get to the toy section, and they had these big trains. There was a big wooden train that you could actually ride on as a kid. It was big enough a little kid could sit on. And they had all these different cars. And somebody had opened the box. And these kids were running around, and they're scooting them, and they'd jump on them and careen into things and crash. It was amazing. I was like, oh, yeah, this is great. And my dad grabbed me by the collar and pulled me back. Hey, what's going on? No, you're not going to do that. But Dad, everybody's doing it. That is not right. They broke those things open, and they're just doing that. That is not right. But Dad, they're doing it. All the other kids are doing it. And my dad said this, I don't care. They're not my kid. I don't care what they do. They're not my kid. I expect better out of you. I didn't like that. But you know what? I got to go home with my dad. That's the benefit of being my dad's kid. I got to go home with him. I love my dad. I love being with my dad. I love being his kid. You see? And the bonus wasn't I didn't get to play the toys for 5 minutes, but I got to go home with my dad. And that's what God's saying to us. They're not my kid. You are. And the benefit is you get to come home with me. See, that's the contentment part that comes in. See, God is no less present in the subtle than in the sensational. We just don't see it. We always want miracles. I want to see more miracles. God's there all the time, though. That's the beauty of it. Now, I'm not much for creeds, but here's one you might like. I don't know. This is something that I think is worth thinking about. Walk in integrity. Trust God's timing. Do not fight for control. Avoid the temptation to manipulate outcomes. Know that God sees, God knows, and He will act. Contentment with godliness is the secret. Do we trust Him enough to let Him take care of the world? Are you too proud to really trust in the Lord?